Welcome to you all. My name's Ruth Slavid and I'm the chair for you today on behalf of PiP in this webinar series, latest in this webinar series when we're talking about transport infrastructure and warehouse architecture. I think that's a great subject to be dealing with, not least because some of us don't think about it as much as we should. Perhaps we think about the great stations, and we'll be hearing about at least one of those today. But I think a lot of things to do with transport and infrastructure are just a little bit too easily forgotten, when of course they are really important. We normally use them all the time. We have missed using them a lot over the last few months. And of course, that infrastructure has actually shaped a lot of our cities. So we've got a really varied set of presentations today. I hope you're looking forward to it, because I really am. Welcome again to anyone who's just joined us. I just want to explain a little bit about how the day will run. We have a fantastic set of speakers. We're going to have 3 speakers who I will introduce one at a time. And after their presentations, after each individual presentation, there will be a chance for some questions. I'll tell you how to ask questions in a moment. Then we will have a brief comfort break, during which I would ask you just to move away from your computer and not to disconnect from your Zoom call. And then we'll have the final 3 speakers. Now, as I mentioned questions, if you'd like to ask a question, and I really hope you will, please do ask it on the Q&A button on your screen. You can see there's a Q&A button and there's a chat button. The Q&A button is for the questions you want to ask the speakers. Anything else you'd like to say, please put into the chat. And one thing I would ask you to put into the chat, because we've done this before and it's really interesting, can you tell us where you've come from? We have had people certainly from all over the world, and even more amazingly from every time zone in the world. I think the last one of these we did, which was at the same sort of time in the morning, we had people dialing in from the USA, where it was about 4 in the morning. So marks to them for dedication. But anyway, just let us know where you are coming from. And that's I'm seeing some of those coming in already. That's fantastic. And we'll refer back to those in a minute. That's basically how it all works. And I think you've seen there's a message you can actually download the delegate pack if you need it. But without more ado, I think what we need to do now is move on to the first of our speakers. And the first one is Frank Anatole, who has the amazing job of being principal architect at Network Rail, and he's going to talk to us about innovation. I just had seen someone say, sorry, I'm only in Oxfordshire. We're not sorry you're only in Oxfordshire at all. Do tell us where you are, even if it's Oxfordshire or even just up the road from me in Finchley. But anyway, I will move over to Frank now. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'll just share my screen. So today I'd like to talk a little bit about Network Rail's current program of works in my department, and the part that design innovation plays in that. And I say design rather than architectural innovation, because it's quite a broad church. I think we all know railway has a history of innovation going back to Stephenson's rocket and Brunel. Some of you may be familiar with the BR corporate identity, and most recently, oops. Hello?
Hi, that's okay, Frank. We're still here.
Okay, sorry. I'm not sure what happened there, but
I think an alert came in.
All right. Let me keep going. Yeah, so and we've had some really good sort of modern stations. such as King's Cross, St Pancras and London Bridge. Innovation, I mean, I like to think, it's always been my belief that innovation isn't necessarily about creating the new and radical, or even the revolutionary. It's about discovering ways of doing things better, really. It's also, it's about asking sort of the right questions at the right time, or redefining the problem that needs to be solved. And I think innovative thinking at its best responds to a sort of clear need, and providing a service. I've lost it again there. Okay.
We're still here.
Okay. So moving swiftly on. Network Rail, we face a challenge in Network Rail, and this image is kind of a metaphor, I think, of the way in which design innovation in railways is kind of quite a daunting challenge. We often talk about Network Rail being an oil tanker and the effort required to sort of change course. It's pretty immense. In Network Rail, the delivery of engineering assurance and asset management often come before or even instead of a dedicated design effort. And the idea of design as a kind of strong visionary objective isn't always first and foremost, because ultimately, Network Rail is a track and trains company. And it's a fact that we employ far more track engineers and designers. Less than 0.1% of the workforce are actually architects. We've got stats like 2,000 miles of track and 3,000 bridges and tunnels, but we've also got 17,000 buildings and 2,500 stations and sort of 20 of the UK's largest stations, which we call managed stations. Even before the COVID challenge, we were beginning to think about our buildings more. I mean, some of them were becoming quite unloved and needed maintenance. And a lot of the focus to be honest, were on the main stations. The Putting the Passengers First initiative provides us with a huge opportunity to look at the design of good environments for passengers, products and services for the public. It's also an opportunity to sort of reimagine our stations. But this isn't a new story. Anyone who's aware of the history of British Rail in the last 70 years will understand it's been a continuous struggle. The architects and designers like Christian Barman here, who worked with Frank Pick originally in London Underground and set up the British Rail Design Panel, began introducing design innovation to the railways. And design champions like George Williams and Jane Priestman, who was recruited from the British Airways Authority, all worked to try to establish a design ethos and identity for the railways that went, some way towards unifying what was and still is to some extent a pretty disparate organisation. And it's kind of seesawed from sort of privatisation to nationalisation during the past century. In external industrial designers and graphic design consultants like Ashmore and Wilkes here and Design Research Unit, Newell and Sol were brought in to soften the hard edges of the railway. All of these kind of design champions reviewed and overhauled the trains and brand, and they conducted competitions, ran exhibitions. And in many ways, they were kind of as effective as Stevenson and Brunel in bringing design innovation to the railways. And this legacy has kind of greatly inspired and influenced our current team, Anthony Dewar and myself. And we're trying to rekindle that spirit in Network Rail. Before COVID, every year we had 1.8 billion people use rail, and every day about 5 million passenger journeys through our stations nationally. During shutdown, ridership fell to just 4%, which is an incredible drop. And it's now just up to over about 30%. That's still nowhere near what it was. So our challenge really is how do we make our stations safe, clean, comfortable, to meet, socialize, and have class-leading facilities and contribute to the communities around them? How do we attract people? back to our stations. We have a rare opportunity, I think, today to contribute something to this, partly due to new leadership, partly by the political and kind of social winds of change. For our team at Network Rail, this involves a renewed focus on the station environment and the visual identity of the railway. Putting people first is our new mantra. And like here at London Bridge, where the station has become not just part of the urban fabric, but an internal kind of public space, a marketplace, an actual kind of street which links north and south communities in Bermondsey. And places like London Bridge show how our stations can be better and work better for communities. Stations really occupy a very important role in our cities and towns, and they're unique social places which, are great for people to meet. They're social hubs. The sociologist Eric Kleinenberg, in his book Palaces for the People, call these places social infrastructure, and they play an important part in social well-being, because wherever people kind of cross paths and linger and gather sort of informally, they strike up conversations and relationships, and communities emerge from that. I really like this description, Palaces for the People, because it conjures up an image of a beautiful space, tall volumes that are truly sort of places of congregation and worship, work and play, and they celebrate life as well as travel, and they inspire and encourage community pride. So we have this important vision for stations, which it's going to evolve, and hopefully we're going to move from the sort of large stations to small ones. So we talk about from these sort of people palaces to the parish halls, and the innovative aspect of this is repurposing some of these stations into libraries, community halls, and local shared workspaces, and delivering their potential to serve communities that kind of reflect an increase in localism. We need to understand station users and local communities to understand their needs, because they change, and innovation actually starts by discovering where your customers, what your customers want. And innovative companies are kind of always changing, because they're always trying to find out new ideas and offer new services and products. Apple, which people regard as an innovative company, actually what Apple do is offer enhanced services. So they're always looking for ways of actually just improving the service they offer people. We have a new strategy at NR that's all about mobility as a service, which is another way of saying we need to evolve and tailor the service we provide to passengers. And we constantly assess that from our annual national passenger surveys, and the significant driver that comes up year after year is station environment. We are matching a number of kind of a vision of the railway to a number of key principles and work streams, and getting our principles of good design, which is a document that we published in 2018, was the first major step in kind of identifying a vision for the UK railway as a whole. And we've made sort of steady progress with this since. While it was kind of created before the current crisis, in many ways, all of these principles kind of respond to it in the way which we hoped they would and envisaged. Principles like identity and community focused and collaborative and environment are current issues that we're all kind of dealing with. The principles enabled us to set up a new design advice panel run by the Design Council that really challenges lazy design. This is the first design panel that Network Rail have ever had. It's the first one since the design panel back in the sort of 50s and 60s. And the panel is composed of a pool of built environment experts that range from architects to accessibility consultants, town planners, engineers, engineering sustainability consultants, and landscape designers, you name it. And in a similar way to the original design panel in 1956, we're trying to move the railways away from its fragmentation and challenge the way that we do things. Railway infrastructure is expected to have a long design life. So it's all the more important to ensure that we design it well in the first place and we don't cut corners for the sake of expediency. Railway architecture can't really follow fashionable trends that date because it takes us so long to come back to that, you know, and to kind of redesign it and build it. So it has to represent sort of timeless classic design. Historically, Network Rail's not been very good, as in these are clients to work with, and we've left the design of small stations to others. We're introducing a groundbreaking suite of design manuals aimed at improving visual consistency and quality on the railway. This is something innovative for Network Rail because we've not really done that well in the past. And we're thinking at all levels of design, master planning around stations, footbridges, urban design, from toilets to the detail of materials and components. And we're working with SMEs on this because we want to work with smaller design companies that are sort of nimble and not bound by processes and stagnant thinking. These manuals are not being created in a back office in NR somewhere, but in small creative design practices that bring fresh thinking to the table. And this again echoes the way that British Rail use design consultancies like Design Research Unit and Newell and Sorrell. A key challenge to embedding good design in large organizations, I think, is promoting an understanding of the value of design and fostering creativity and developing an outward-looking collaborative culture is a key priority for us. So since 2017, we've been partnering with the RIBA in using design competitions to demonstrate the real benefits of kind of what we call disruptive thinking. We started to look at footbridges, which had been untouched for about 50 years. And to help publicize this work, we decided to run an open ideas footbridge competition that was kind of actually, you know, exceeded our expectations and attracted 120 entries from sort of 19 different countries. This is the winner, called Frame. We're currently developing this bridge concept. It's by the Danish architect Gottlieb Paladin. It's going to become one of our standard footbridges in a portfolio of bridges that we've got planned. And we're also looking to see if we can develop the concept into associated small station design and associated componentry and furniture. This is another design that was part of the footbridge competition, but we had developing a prototype vehicle for a sort of innovative composite model footbridge. We're partnering with the National Composite Centre as a Tier 1 member. It's the first rail infrastructure company to do so, and that gives us access to a world-leading expertise. Other things going on, if you've been running around the stations recently, you'll see the sort of station bench competition that we're running with the London Festival of Architecture, which is great fun. We're looking at ways the station can react to passengers by automatically anticipating their requirements, providing useful on-hand information. We're also working with external tech companies to use AR software to help the public planning and project teams pre-visualize footbridges and wayfinding in real time as you move through spaces. A major advantage of external collaboration is the capacity for innovation through challenge and disruption, as I've mentioned before. So another example of this is our engaging with think tank organizations like Hack and Partners, in this instance, to develop a wayfinding flow analysis tool. And this kind of joint brainstorming is about understanding what services we're trying to provide and innovating to solve these problems. You have to accept the disruption, I think, in order to move on in many ways. And finally, I think I'm near the end here. We're also thinking strategically. I mentioned small stations. In 2018, we commissioned Arup to examine the future role that stations play in our towns and cities. and they published a report called Tomorrow's Living Stations. Last year, we followed that up by launching Think Station, which aimed to directly communicate with the hugely diverse base of stakeholders that stations serve. 11 workshops were held throughout the country that involved 324 stakeholders and train operators and all sorts of stakeholders. And the aim was to define a brief for the footbridge competition, station competition, which the RIBA launched with us earlier this year, and we've just got we've just sort of shortlisted the entries, and we'll be announcing those soon. So back to the oil tanker. The question is, are we altering course? I think it's too early to tell. I think the current crisis and the franchise restructuring and the kind of Williams report that still has to come out and tell us what it wants to do with railway. No one really knows, but I think we are at least kind of, you know, nudging that tanker in a new direction. It's greatly helped by the board support that we have. Sir Peter Hendy and Andrew Haynes are avid design and architecture advocates, and yeah,
Hello? Oh, have we lost him?
Hi there.
We've
it
lost him.
appears that Frank has just dropped off the line.
Right, but I'm here.
You are here indeed.
Okay. Well, I thought that was fascinating. I'm so sorry that we chopped him off before the end. With hope he'll come back. I've also slightly. Oh yes, that's it. I found it. In amongst the chat, there's a lovely message from Mark Webb, who's in Sussex, who says he says, I worked with Jane Priestman when I was a student back in the 80s. She was a really good leader that tried to get all the students involved. I can believe that because I did some work with her as well, sort of doing some judging, and she was a great person to interact with. So that was wonderful. I'm just having a look at the questions we've got, but frankly, I don't think we'll be able to place them. Somebody's asked if there's a place for traditional Victorian stations to be renovated.
Frank's back on
Is
audio.
he?
Yeah.
Oh,
yes,
hi.
I am. I'm sorry about that. It's,
Well, no, I'm sorry it happened to you, Frank. I don't know whether you've heard me talking or not, but it was a great presentation, albeit perhaps cut off a little earlier than you and
right.
I and the listeners could have wished. We've had a question here saying, is there a place for traditional Victorian stations being renovated, as in, for example, St Pancras?
There's always a space for that, I think. One of the provisos of the, or one of the things we wanted really for the competition was a range of ideas. So we weren't limiting it to one winner. We've actually shortlisted 6, and we wanted a range of solutions for stations.
Yeah.
So not just the modern, you know, something that could actually work with the old as well.
That's great. And there's another question I'm going to put to you, which I think will probably make our final question, but I'm going to add something in of my own here as well, saying there seem to be a lot of different design avenues. And his question is, how do you manage and organize all this input? And I suppose the question I'm going to append to it is, on the one hand, you talk about consistency, and on the other, you obviously want to take lots of ideas in. So that's another question really about how you balance it. And if you can answer those, that would be fabulous.
Well, you're quite right, I think, to put your finger on that, because it's an immense task. We've got 30, for example, 30 guidelines documents to compile, to produce for all different topics. So we potentially will have 30 different consultants, not all working at the same time, but say 10 at any one time. And you can imagine kind of dealing with that many is quite a challenge. And so we're not a huge department, so that's something that we have to deal with. We are getting one or two more staff to help us do that, but we are relying on sort of collaborative software to help us engage with those consultants at the same time on a common sort of database, a common environment, online environment, so we can share information while we're producing these guidance documents.
That's fabulous.
I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah,
but,
that's really useful. Thank you. We are short of time, so I think I'm just going to thank you very much. That was a great presentation. So sorry you had the technical difficulties, but we all do. And I'm going to move on to our next speaker now. Thank you. And our next speaker is Marko Neskovic, who is a partner at Hawkins Brown, and he's going to talk about homes and oversight development. Marko.
Thank you, Ruth, and good morning, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. Can you see that?
That's great, thanks.
So I'm going to talk about the positive impact infrastructure development can have on our sort of public realm and our communities, really. And I've selected 4 projects we've worked on to illustrate that, because they all have quite different contexts and sort of different scales of opportunity. The first one is going to be about Tottenham Court Road station, which is really all about developing within sensitive city centre locations, and then modern town centre, which sort of illustrates some of the sort of planning for growth around transport nodes that's going on, and then Clapham Junction, really, which is a future stations initiative we worked on, a self-funded initiative, which is really looking at a much more transformational opportunity, perhaps. And then the last one is going to be East Croydon Bridge, which sort of demonstrates how even a small connection can act as a sort of major catalyst, really, for regeneration. So this aerial photo just gives you a bit of context, really, a bit of an overview of the urban fabric that's affected to deliver the new Crossrail station entrances at Tottenham Court Road. And the platforms here will be around 300 meters long, so they span quite a long distance from east to west in this case. And so there'll be new entrances, one at the Dean Street and Oxford Street corner along Oxford Street, and the other one will be on the sort of Tottenham Court Road and Oxford Street junction, just at the bottom of Centre Point. And part of the works is connecting 2 Crossrail tunnels, and that required at the Centre Point end an upgrade to the existing station concourse, which you can see here highlighted in red just at the bottom of Centre Point. And here you can see an image of what the public realm in the area, the junction, looked like before the arrival of Crossrail and before the upgrade took place. For those who remember, the fountain at the bottom of Centre Point occupied quite a large part of the public space, and some of the area extended right up to the edge of the pavement. And that sort of made orientation and wayfinding quite difficult, and created a real sort of barrier for pedestrian crossings and connection into the sort of Soho area and St Giles. It sort of also meant that the station exits were often congested, and there was very little space, really. And so on the pavements, to deal with the sort of people flow and amount of people coming out of the stations. And so the upgrades sort of realized the opportunity to improve the public realm around the station, significantly, really. And it really created and helped create a sort of purposeful civic space that's given the station sort of real presence, and has also really helped with orientation and wayfinding. I suppose key to the success has been to extend the public realm, not just at grade, but also into the station concourse below. And that was done really by creating generous entrances, bringing lots of daylight down into the concourse, but also the use of public art to bring a sort of a different sort of quality and joy to these spaces. And so there's of course already a really great precedent of that happening at Tottenham Court Road in the Paolozzi mosaics, which reflect some of the vibrant life of Soho and Oxford Street, and those are of course still in place and have been refurbished as part of the work. And so Art on the Underground commissioned a number of artists to carry on that great tradition here, and in this case, at Tottenham Court Road and the upgrade, it was Daniel Bren's work that was installed at concourse level. And his artwork really connects the ground floor with the lower concourse level and sort of defines the characters of the below ground spaces. And that really helps with orientation and wayfinding, and this idea of extending the public realm right down into the station. And here you can see that in situ, and this idea of how the artwork is beginning to is seen at grade and leads the public down into the concourse level. And then moving on to the western end, so the western end of the Crossrail station is a more integrated and compact solution at the western end, illustrated here in red. And it was integrated into two new buildings, Block C, which is addressing Oxford Street, and Block D, located within the sort of Soho conservation area just behind it. And this side was really all about integrating the station needs within a compact building mass. And that had to equally respond to Oxford Street and the conservation area context behind it. And one of the key moves you can see here on the right-hand side was to coordinate how station entrance and retail kind of really worked. So one of the sort of early decisions that had been made was to move the station away from Oxford Street and allowing that to the station entrance away from Oxford Street and allowing that to spill out onto the pedestrianised area of Dean Street, and so avoiding the congestion of the pavement on Oxford Street, and that also allowed so the retail frontages to be maintained along Oxford Street. And this next view is from Dean Street, looking towards Oxford Street, and that illustrates the sort of different architectural approaches that we had to develop with Westminster to respond to the different sort of Soho context immediately behind Oxford Street. And one of the key moves here was to extend the active frontages along Dean Street. And public art also featured at this end of the station and was strategically placed, again, to sort of help with orientation and wayfinding, really. In this case, it's a digital artwork which can be seen on the approach from Holland Street. So that will be the other side of where the station entrance is. So it really helps you find your way around and identifies the station entrance and location. And then this axonometric here shows how that sort of artwork also plays very much part of the sort of arrival and entrance sequence as you come into the station or as you're exiting the station. And then the final slide for Tottenham Court Road is this axonometric view, really that illustrates the complexity of the building. So you can see the tunnel and the station below ground, and how the oversight development needs to integrate with the station entrance on block C and the ventilation shaft in block D over here. And this level of complexity is really in part a result of building in a sensitive and particularly dense urban context. So that really means that the building has to be really quite compact and integrate things like the ventilation shaft within the building. And so the building then needs to deal with also vibration and reverberation for the structure that's coming through the station, as well as the ventilation structure. And that means acoustic isolation in the structure and in the facade detailing. And then the other aspect I wanted to just sort of talk about that is really sort of part of the challenges is reducing the construction time on these sites to reduce the impact on station operations. So we ended up looking at designing, well, these were designed to be prefabricated and all the components craned into place on site to reduce the amount of construction time. So moving on to Morden Town Centre, this is a bit of work that we've undertaken with the TfL commercial development team in Merton, and created a sort of strategic development framework. And this really illustrates a great example of planning for regeneration and growth for town centre around a sort of important transport node. And this sort of strategic development framework does that by establishing some of the spatial, economic and social principles that any sort of development that comes forward will need to follow to maximize the benefit for the community. So really what this document does is really creating a great opportunity to create a more connected town centre with healthy streets and purposeful amenity spaces, as well as new homes. And so one of the key principles is to reduce traffic on the high street and prioritize pedestrian, cyclist and bus movement, but also widening pavements and re-establishing retail and commercial space presence and accessibility. So it's really about revitalizing those spaces and claiming them back for pedestrians in the community. I suppose the other thing that the strategic framework does is look quite carefully as to how different modes of transport can be brought together so that the interchange time is better, more visible, and helps the onward journey. And then just behind the high street and connecting into the wider neighborhood are then other types of spaces and amenity spaces, quieter open spaces that can accommodate a variety of uses that can cater for our sort of diverse existing and growing communities, really. So it's an important opportunity of these sort of regeneration projects that really can only come to fruition if they're planned well ahead of time, in ways that the strategic development framework does. And then I'll move on to the Clapham Junction Futures Initiative. So this was a self-funded initiative we undertook with Mott MacDonald and Laing O'Rourke, which identified Clapham Junction as a station that needed, well, it was experiencing significant growth, and so it was identified as a station that, if that growth continues, will need to increase in capacity, will need to be upgraded. So for us, that really represented an opportunity to explore how development, transport-oriented development or oversight development can not only contribute towards the infrastructure upgrade, but also offer transformational change to the local environment and connectivity of the public realm around the railway. So this slide shows a bit of the context around Clapham Junction, its proximity to amenity spaces, including the Thames, which is very close by, Clapham Common, Wandsworth Common as well, and of course some of the regeneration that's already taking place in this area. But the one thing that really sticks out in this image the dominant features of the railway corridors within the urban fabric, which have a significant effect on this sort of connectivity between the neighborhoods and the quality of life of those who live and work next to it. That's really a sort of historic remnant of the railway, not just here, but in a way throughout London and many other places. And so this diagram illustrates further sort of barrier created by the railway in a bit more detail. Connecting north-south via the high street is really difficult. You either have to go through Falcon Road and under an underpass, which is long and dark, quite narrow, shared by cars and buses and pedestrians and cyclists, and it's really quite unpleasant, I would say, and feels unsafe, particularly at night. And so the only other way to get from north to south is to take the long way around, which is a detour of about a kilometre. And so we now have the means of bringing railway corridors and land into more productive use via oversight development, and this clearly has the potential to do that. And this and the next couple of slides illustrate a vision for that on this side, starting with highlighting in this diagram the potential for additional north-south routes, but also connecting, in this case, east-west, via sort of green corridors that here connect Falcon, Park, and Wandsworth. So it's about creating connectivity and amenity space, and of course, building over the railway also benefits from containing some of the noise and potential issues with air quality, and providing a much better quality of life and environment for those who live above or next to the railway infrastructure. Below this level is a sketch showing the realignment of the straightened platforms, which then provide greater capacity to cope with the projected growth, and that addressed the sort of operational and phasing challenges, which McDonald worked on quite a bit with us, but also it really crucially needed to consider the alignment with the concourse below and the relationship critically with the public realm. And the station concourse in this case is located below the platforms, and what it's enabled us to do is really open that up to Falcon Road, just on the right-hand side there, and extend the public realm into the concourse itself. And that really offered an opportunity to extend the high street into the station and provide an active and safe connection to the other side of the tracks and beyond into the wider network of streets and neighborhood. And of course, at the heart of the concourse, we've imagined and looked at creating a really compact transport interchange hub. So this is where you can really easily exchange between from your network rail assets to buses, bikes, and Crossrail too, if it arrives below it. And this drawing shows the sort of layer cake that creates really, with the development above the platforms and tracks, the concourse level below, and in this case Crossrail right arriving below ground. And really what this illustrates is that planning ahead for this is really important in enabling, for example, a really compact transport hub for Crossrail to needs to be planned for if we really want that to be able to arrive in one place and create a really compact interchange hub. And then finally, on this one is an illustration of what a view from St. John's Hill might look like towards the station, and it shows the sort of potential of the new public realm in front of the station and how it could extend into the concourse, connecting to the transport interchange hub and through to the other side of the railway, on the northern side of Clapham Junction, really. Final couple of slides, really. This is the East Croydon Station Bridge and Master Plan, really. And this is really a demonstration of how a small additional connection in form of a bridge can become a catalyst for regeneration, and enable development to come forward. The bridge connection was part of a wider master plan, which recognized the importance of connecting the two sites flanking the railway, and providing additional access not just onto the platforms, but also an unpaid access that connected right across, that connected the neighborhood right across the railway, really. And this image shows the bridge being push-launched across the tracks really slowly whilst the railway was still operational. And then this was it in place before the development came forward. And then finally, a more recent image showing the emerging development around it and how that's transformed this place. I think that's the end of my slides. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marko. It's really interesting. And we've had a question from Bob Eden, and I have to say he's put it more poetically than I would have done. But as someone who knows Clapham Junction pretty well, I had the same thought. He says, Marko, part of the joy of rail travel is sitting on an open station, pondering the clouds while waiting for the train to come. How much weight did the station experience carry in the evolution of design? How does the experience pulse as travellers pass through? And I have to say, having been to places like, I think King's Cross Thameslink is the most hideous I've been to. But anyway, tell me, have you thought about what it's like in the station and the fact that you are depriving the travellers of light?
Well, I think I mean, it's a really good question, and I think there are opportunities to bring in light through various levels of the of the station structure, and it does come down to how the development above it is arranged, really. So London Bridge is a good example of how light can be brought down through the platforms and all the way down onto the concourse. So I think it is about a careful coordination and design development, really, of that.
Thank you. Well, I would just say I've had a couple of comments saying things like amazing webinar, and the East Croydon transformation is amazing. So thank you very much indeed. We are going to move on to our next speaker now, but that was absolutely tip top. And our next speaker is Craig Wright, who is Technical Sales Director of Movetech, and he's going to talk to us about vehicle turntables. And I have to say, having done things like visiting the old Derby Roundhouse, I suspect we're talking about motor vehicles rather than trains, but it is a fantastic thing to do. So over to you, Craig.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, I'll share my screen. And my presentation is perhaps not as attractive as the ones that have gone before it. As an engineer, I'm a little bit more utilitarian than I am making things look pretty. So bear with me. Okay, I hope you can all see that. So I'm going to talk about vehicle access turntables. It's not an innovation, it's not a new product, it's something that's been used for many years, it's something certainly we've been providing for many years. But what I really want to talk to you about is how vehicle turntables are being used more for a health and safety perspective than anything else. So I'll first just talk about who we are and what we do. So Movetech UK is a trading name for British Turntable Company Limited. We've been going for over 60 years now. It started from a single request for a car showroom turntable, which our current MD's dad designed and manufactured and realised that he could make this into a business. In the 60s, the swinging 60s, he moved into retail display, so turntables for shop windows and in-store displays. And then in the 1980s, he moved into commercial and industrial applications, and that included vehicle access turntables. The Movetech UK brand name was launched 12 years ago because a lot of what we do now isn't just turntable related. So we currently have several divisions, including the retail display, which I already mentioned. We also do revolving stage rental for the film, TV, theatre and live events industries. As I'm sure you can imagine, that side of the business has taken a massive hit in the last 7 months. But we also do industrial materials handling, so moving large objects in industrial environments, and the commercial vehicle access turntables. These vehicle access turntables do represent the bulk of what we do. We do work for the principal contractor in most instances. So working in the construction industry, we hold all the sort of standard ISOs. We also have Charles and Construction Line Gold accreditation. In terms of the personnel we employ, we've got in-house site supervisors and health and safety qualified people working on the project teams. So this year we should have been exhibiting at the Intertraffic exhibition in March, I think it was, in Amsterdam, and that got cancelled. So we made a video for it. So I'm just going to show the first minute of the video, just as an introduction again to the company, and also just to show a vehicle turntable in action. So as I said, it's not just turntables that we do. We do wheeled trolleys, we do air film equipment where we move large loads on a film of air, but the vehicle access turntables are, if you like, our bread and butter. So obviously this is a well-known British supermarket using a 15-metre HGV turntable in a very restricted yard to safely revolve every truck that comes into the building, so that they can unload and keep the size of their service yard as small as absolutely necessary. This particular one, they do have to rotate on the way in, and they also have to rotate to get out. Some of them, they drive straight out. We'll have a look at another one later. So why did the architects specify vehicle access turntables? As I said, they've been used for many years. The original sort of traditional reason for specifying a turntable was where yards were tight, there was nothing they could do about it, and vehicle manoeuvres would be awkward and difficult to achieve. So it was more of a practical reason. At the moment, they're most commonly used for practical reasons, but also for planning reasons. A condition of planning may be that they have to have entry and exit of all vehicles into a service yard in forward gear. In central London, this is almost always for refuse vehicles and delivery vehicles, excuse me. But we have done a lot of out-of-town supermarkets where they want to keep the car park as big as possible, the store as big as possible, and the service yard as absolutely small as possible. One unintended benefit of using the vehicle turntable is environmental. So we're reducing the carbon emissions at the point of use and reducing the energy used overall. We can rotate a 44-ton wagon with a 5-kilowatt motor. And during that time, the vehicle doesn't have to have its engine on idling. But what I really want to talk to you about today is the sort of emerging trend for specifying a turntable, and that's for safety reasons. So we can remove the need for reversing or complex maneuvers in what is a very confined space. And obviously that has health ramifications and safety ramifications. So reversing maneuvers in a restricted space is what we're really trying to achieve. So according to the Health and Safety Executive, nearly a quarter of all deaths involving vehicles at work occur during reversing. Not only do we have the potential for personnel injury, but we also can damage vehicles, building, equipment, and anything that's in that confined space when a driver is trying to make an awkward and complex maneuver with little visibility. Service yards invariably contain multiple hazards. So columns, walls, bins, storage, cages, and usually, you know, a few years after a building's been handed over, there's a lot more in a service yard than perhaps anyone would have envisaged at the point of design. So how can we improve health and safety with a turntable? Well, we regularly talk with architects at the very early stages about the turntable requirements for a specific development. Working with the council and finding out the refuse vehicles that are typically used in that area, we can advise the safest size of vehicle turntable to accommodate all the expected traffic and to keep the exclusion zone as small as possible. If we can reduce the diameter of the turntable so that we only pick up the wheels of the turntable, of the vehicle, sorry, we can reduce the likelihood that the vehicle position varies from vehicle to vehicle. So if we can make sure that every time a vehicle is on that turntable, its wheels are in the same position, the front and rear overhang are the same, then we know that it's safe to rotate. We do try and work with the architects to design a half-metre clearance between this swept circle, we call it, and any static obstructions. This just means that if there was an instance that somebody made it into the area and a vehicle was rotating, then there's no way that there can be any personal injury as a result. It's not always possible, especially when we're doing retrofits or refurbishments of buildings. So we have to consider risk mitigation in those extreme conditions. As I said before, we like to try and fix the vehicle position whilst it's rotating, and we can remove the variability from the driver. But where half a metre clearance can't be achieved, this becomes even more important. So the way we can do that further, clear and obvious floor demarcation for the swept circle is the first and most important thing that we suggest to our customers and specifying a turntable. So if we have a 15-metre turntable or a 16.5-metre wagon, we know that if we paint a 17-metre circle on the floor, the vehicle can't possibly be outside of that and rotate. What that also means is it's very obvious for the operators and anybody in the area to see that this is where the vehicle is going to be rotating, and nothing fixed should ever be put in that swept circle. We can also use vehicle monitoring sensors, position sensors, to ensure that the correct position is achieved before the vehicle is rotated. So we can have light beams or laser distance finders at the front and rear of the turntable at the entry position, and make sure that the turntable can't rotate until that vehicle is in the correct position. What we've also done a lot with tight service yards or busy service yards, especially service yards where there are other functions, maybe bike storage, maybe accessible parking. We have to consider that there is a risk of personnel ingress. So our control system for the turntable, we can have safety interlocks on personnel doors, vehicle gates, lift doors, anything like that, to ensure that the control system is inhibited in the event that one of those doors or gates has either been left open or is opened during a rotation. The turntable just will not rotate. And that means that it's up to the operator then to make sure that the vehicle's in the right position and that all doors and access points have been closed before they can rotate the turntable. So I'll just show you another example of a vehicle turntable. Just bear with me. Not this one. This one's actually a Waitrose in Surbiton. So this is a unit where the service yard was very long and thin. So we couldn't get away with having quite a significant reverse maneuver on this particular store. And they wanted to be able to get in multiple vehicles, which meant the vehicle couldn't remain on the turntable during unloading. So as you can see, we've got multiple unloading points for the vehicles, but it does mean that they do have to do quite a long reverse maneuver off of the turntable. However, because the vehicle has been pointed in the right direction, there's no complex steering involved, and as soon as the turntable stops, the driver can see the dock leveler in his mirrors, and it's a much easier maneuver for him to achieve. And in this instance, this is one of those turntables I mentioned earlier, where once they've finished unloading, they can drive straight out. On some units, we have put traffic light control systems in, but that's not always necessary. Perhaps overkill in a lot of instances. So the last thing really that I wanted to talk about, and I think I'm getting through this perhaps a little quicker than I needed to, is turntables on construction sites. This is a relatively new thing for us. I do get inquiries a lot from principal contractors about using a turntable for the duration of the construction phase. And what we find is that whilst it's going to solve a lot of problems for the principal contractors, that rarely does the cost benefit analysis actually allow. I'm sure you can appreciate that one of these turntables is quite an expensive piece of equipment. We do currently have one installed at a construction site. It's 2 years into its 5-year life with 3 years left. We installed this in August 2018. Obviously, I suspect that the development's probably slightly delayed after the year that we've had. But we regularly maintain and service this machine. Now, we're expecting another one to go in next year for the same principal contractor. Now, the video I'm about to show you is off of YouTube. It's in the public domain. I can't tell you who the client is or where it is because of an NDA, but this video might give the game away, but I didn't. So this is a video somebody took, I don't know what's happened there, from an office building across the road from the turntable. So every single vehicle that goes through this construction site has to go down a very, very long, thin road. And the only way to get back out is to use this vehicle turntable. So I don't know if you noticed that. I can't get rid of that. But the operator has to close the gate and he has to make sure that the vehicle is in the correct position before he can rotate the vehicle and leave. He also has to press a few confirmation buttons at the front of the vehicle to confirm that the vehicle is indeed on the turntable and in the correct position. It was an extra safe system that we developed with the principal contractor. It was a little bit belt and braces, but I think it satisfied them, and we were more than happy to do it. So that's all I've really got to say about turntables. I hope that was okay.
That was great. Thank you. Yeah, it was. And I have to say, I don't know how many of our audience felt like that, but I felt as if I was definitely learning about things I didn't know about. Now, we've got a question. Hang on, I'm in the wrong place. Yes. We've got a question from someone who said, is there a considerable maintenance costs? Could you use this approach on weighbridge stations? And someone else said, oh, fantastic. I had no idea turntables were on the up. Do you anticipate lorries vehicles getting larger and further accommodation to be made? And on the other hand, somebody's actually asked us if you have turntables for domestic use. Now, that's 3 questions, and I'm going to ask you if you can answer them all within 2 minutes, because
I shall do my best.
You think we're running late.
Okay, so for the standard commercial vehicle turntables, we always say that to start with, from practical completion, we like to service them every 3 months. So you're talking about £2,000 to £3,000 maintenance costs a year on that. If after the first year it turns out that they're not being used a lot, or they're being used considerably more than anticipated, then obviously we need to readdress that. But we do have service level agreements going with most clients. In terms of the vehicles, we've recently done one in Europe, and that was for in the Netherlands, and that was for 50-ton what they call road trains, which is a rigid vehicle and a trailer. That was a 17-meter unit. I don't anticipate that coming into the UK, and I don't anticipate us ever having to do a bigger turntable than that for vehicles. And smaller turntables, yes, we do domestic turntables, but our business model is very much bespoke design and build for the customer's requirements. So we're not a pile them high and sell them cheap kind of customer. So The domestic units we do tend to be in central London. They tend to be very high end. They tend to be for clients with multiple cars and usually a driver. It's that level of client. We're not going to sell you a car, a turntable to put your Qashqai on, but you might be putting your Land Rovers and your Jaguars on them.
Okay, well, if you want to put your Qashqai on one, you obviously have to shop elsewhere. But
Yeah.
come to you for everything bespoke, from fancy cars right up to road trains. That was fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, we are running slightly late, but what I'm going to suggest is that we cut our comfort break down to 10 minutes. So we will be resuming at 10:15. I have seen that people are coming from all over the place, from Malaysia, from Dubai, from Belgium, as well as from Peckham and Loughton and all points other. Just leave your Zoom call open and walk away and do what you need to do. And I will look forward to seeing you again at 10:15, which is just under 10 minutes. Thank you.
Morning.
Morning. Hello. Welcome. I'm just waiting until the dot of 15:15. On my watch, it's about 30 seconds away. But I'd just like to welcome everybody back. Max is here and keen to talk. So let me just say again, thank you all very much for coming back. If you have questions, do try asking them during the presentation, because by the time we get into the conversation at the end, often it's a little bit too late to take your questions. So ask questions, ask them in the Q&A box. And ask them as soon as they occur to you, because I'm sure you can all multitask. Okay, to anyone just rejoining us, we are back now. We've had 3 great presentations. We have another 3 presentations coming, which I am sure will be equally good. And without further ado, I am going to introduce Max Fawcett, who's Associate Principal at Grimshaw. And as you can see, he's going to be talking to us about the Curzon Street HS2 station in Birmingham. Over to you, Max.
Thank you, Ruth. Morning, everyone. It's a really good opportunity to be able to give you this talk this morning. Obviously, HS2, it's a very large project, and there's been a lot of coverage of the project, but perhaps there have been fewer opportunities to date to share some of the design proposals with people. So it's great to be here. I think I'll start by just giving a little bit of background about the HS2 project, because I noticed we've got people from outside the United Kingdom joining us today. So HS2, or High Speed 2, is going to be a new rail network for the UK. It's going to be built in phases. First phase will run from London to Birmingham. So Birmingham is the second largest city in the UK. The second phase will run to the north, and that, as well as the northern cities, that will include links also to Scotland. So I think I'll start by just giving a little bit of background to our project, which is part of this network, which is Birmingham Curzon Street Station. So Curzon Street will be the northern terminus of phase 1. So that's running from London Euston to Birmingham. Now, it's worth saying that we've been working on this project from about the beginning of 2018. So almost 3 years work. But in that relatively short time, the design has developed significantly. We've basically gone through a design stage, a consultation stage, and we've ended up with, I think we were the first station to gain planning consent in the HS2 network. And I think it's a credit to the collaboration, not just the client team with HS2, although that's been very important. But also it's been a collaboration with the city of Birmingham, and really to get to the stage that we've got to in terms of completion of scheme design, planning consent. It really wouldn't have happened without such a large and collaborative group of stakeholders and partners within the city. So that's been really, really important. So I'll just move on to the next slide. So at Curzon Street, what we're basically doing is it's more than a station. It's effectively, we're expanding Birmingham city centre by about half a kilometre. We're increasing opportunities for regeneration in that part of Birmingham. We're also creating a very large new transport and infrastructure hub, new interchange basically. The slide you're looking at now is a new public space, a new piece of public realm. There will be a massive expansion of public realm and landscape around the station. This space will be known as Station Square. It will not only provide access to Curzon Street, but it will also provide access to Birmingham Moor Street Station, which is just to the right of the picture. So in a way, it'll be almost like the King's Cross Square, where you have two stations coming together with a public space from where there'll be links to other transport connections. Just to give everyone an idea of scale in terms of the Curzon Street station and the station shed roof, what I've done here is I've superimposed Curzon over the St Pancras station shed by Barlow. Curzon is a 70-metre span, so it's approximately the same size as St Pancras. It's a little bit shorter in height. So Curzon is 20 metres from concourse level. So this really is going to be a very dramatic new space, a major new building, major new station, not only for the HS2 network, but also for the city. And as Frank was saying earlier, that the UK has an amazing rail heritage, and really we've taken a lot of our inspiration from the Victorian engineering from that period, but hopefully developed it in a more contemporary way for this century. So to give you some more context, Birmingham city centre, right in the centre of the image there on the right, the New Street Station, if you can see where I'm pointing, is located here. Here's the HS2 station, which is over to the north east of the city. The station is almost going to be almost half a kilometre long, as I've said, and as I've said, it will catalyse growth of the city centre and regeneration in that area. On the left, you can see two images of the local railway heritage. Top left is Philip Hardwick's original Curzon Street Station. So this was built in 1838, almost a Georgian piece of architecture rather than a Victorian piece of architecture. So Hardwick also designed the London terminus of the London to Birmingham Railway in the same year, 1838. He designed the Euston-Durwick Arch, which sadly is no longer with us. But the northern terminus survived, as you can see. And one of the things that we will be doing at Curzon is providing a setting for these heritage buildings, and also helping to bring them back to life. Bottom left is Moor Street Station, interestingly an Edwardian station, so built at the beginning of the 20th century. So in a way, you have the two, you have the beginning and almost the later end period of the railway boom in the Victorian age, from 1838 to the early 20th century, represented in the area. I found this photograph actually in a railways magazine, and I thought it was fascinating. Taken in 1974, looking across the Curzon Street site. At that time, it was still there was still a lot of activity, a lot of rail activity. Still, the railway lands were very much in use. You can see the Birmingham skyline in the middle distance there. And in the center left of the image, you can probably just about make out the elevation of Hardwick's portico. And the northern wing, which unfortunately was demolished, I think soon after this photograph was taken. So an overview of the new station proposals, just again to give you an idea of scale. Birmingham City Centre on the right of the image. You can probably make out the old Great Western Viaduct serving Moore Street Station coming in here in the middle of the image. What this visual also shows is that there's quite a large level change across the site. So from the city centre end, from the western end, down to this area here where Old Curzon Street Station is located. There's a level change of about 15 metres. So accommodating that level change has been one of the key challenges that we've dealt with in the design. You can also see the big expansion of landscaping, public realm in the area, and you can probably make out the new tram network. That's the West Midlands Metro, so there will be a new tram stop in an area called New Canal Street as part of a second public space. So when you build a railway in the UK, you have to obtain an Act of Parliament to give you what are called parliamentary powers, and of course HS2 have done this for the London to Birmingham section. One of the things we've been able to do with the current designs is reduce the footprint, the overall land footprint of the station. So the image at the top is the current design footprint, and the image at the bottom is what's known as the hybrid bill proposal, which was an indicative design prepared to obtain parliamentary consent through the UK Parliament. So not only have we reduced the footprint, we've also created much more generous public realm spaces. On the left, on the west, Station Square, by pulling the building back, and in the east, a new space that I mentioned earlier, New Canal Street, below the new HS2 railway viaducts, which will also take a new tram stop. So not only a reduction in footprint, but a reduction from the hybrid bill reference design in terms of massing and scale. This also enables the existing Curzon Street Station building, the heritage building. It gives it a bit more sky and gives it its own sort of presence in that part of the new development. But by, again, as I said, by pulling back the building to create a new public space in the west, we've been able to give more space back to the city, back to the public realm. So a key driver in the design proposals, as I've explained, was this 15-meter level change. And what we've done is we've grounded the building on what we call an outcrop. The outcrop picks up that level change, but allows activity to the public realm and to the spaces around the station. And it's on that outcrop that the new railway viaducts are coming in. Birmingham is essentially a hill town, and the viaducts are coming in at +118 above +109, where you've got the New Canal Street public space there. So those viaducts are partially sunk into what's known as the Curzon slope. And as the ground slopes down, the viaducts then emerge and become more visible. So I'll take you now very quickly through some of what we call the design vision aspects of Curzon Street. So these are principles that really guided our design approach in collaboration with both HS2 and the local stakeholders in Birmingham. The first one of our principles is that the engineering is the architecture. So what we mean by that is that the way the building performs and the way it's engineered is the same thing as the architectural language and the architectural expression. So we have attempted to create a design that's very legible, it's very clear, so you can understand how that structure works. This is, as I said, it's a 70-meter tied arch. You can see how the base of that arch is picked up by the concrete stanchions. You can understand how the pin connection works. You can read each element of the structure very clearly, and hopefully it's a clear and legible expression of both the engineering and the architectural design. Another aspect is making places in and around the station, so the station doesn't become a point of severance within the city, maximizing the opportunity for public space, increasing the amount of green area, introducing permeable areas for effective drainage, and as I said, placemaking and providing a context for the historic buildings. This shot shows the new glazed facade at platform level, which is the middle band you can see in the image, and this is one of the areas where you'll actually be able to see the HS2 stations, the HS2 trains, excuse me, from the city. And another place we're creating, as I said earlier, is this new public square, New Canal Street beneath the HS2 viaducts. This is part of the setting for the old Curzon Street Station. This will be wrapped with a new masonry colonnade, and it will form a second entrance at a lower level to the station. There are going to be two entrances at Curzon, one at the western end at Station Square, and this one at the lower level at New Canal Street. From platform level, a generous amount of roof lighting and to provide daylight down to the space below. And this will, we hope, trigger more regeneration, reuse of the existing Network Rail viaducts, which run parallel to the new HS2 alignment, and really bring this part of Birmingham to life and provide connections and accessibility to Digbeth to the south to support that regeneration. So from the context, quickly take you into the station, tell you a little bit about how it works. This isometric, or this exploded isometric diagram, we like to refer to this as the kit of parts. It's really taking a very complex brief, both for the station operations, but also for the urban integration. It's taking that complex brief and it's devising a very simple, clear diagram, basically, a series of layers, a series of elements that come together really quite logically. So from the lower level, from the base of the drawing, all of the back of house facilities for the station are clustered in one area. So that's obviously the most efficient arrangement for servicing the building, servicing the trains. Staff access, they have a front door as well as the passengers. It's very important. They have natural light for their officers. The staff can access the building of Curzon Promenade, which is the public space you saw earlier. You can see bottom left the eastern entrance in this area here, and then the western entrance at the upper level. And then the platforms, the 450-meter long platforms on the viaduct structures, and then the overarching lightweight roof enclosing the concourse above. This is a view looking from the western concourse out to the Birmingham skyline. We are looking at a series of timber cassette panels to add warmth to the interior, to help with the acoustics, just to add the sort of intangible characters of the environment, just to improve that passenger experience. Plenty of daylighting from roof lights. You can probably also see a series of vertical totems. That's really a piece of industrial design that we're doing with HS2, which contains lighting and in devices. We can keep components down at a relatively low level for ease of maintenance. View of the concourse, looking out to the northeast. One of the ideas we're looking at the moment is actually bringing in potentially public exhibitions into this space, so to actually bring the city into the station, and again better integrate that into the cultural life of the city. And this obviously provides access also down to the platform level. There's a view at platform level, so a series of generous voids formed within that concourse level to allow daylight and good intuitive wayfinding, so it's easy to find your way around the station. And finally, the eastern concourse, where the viaducts and the platforms are at the upper level. So access at this location is direct from the street level. I'm now going to attempt to play a video. There may be some slight stuttering in the feed on this, so let's hope this is going to be relatively smooth. So, starting the journey, passenger journey from Station Square in the west. You see the lighting totems used both externally and internally. Coming in now to the western concourse, the main retail areas and customer facilities. Heading up towards the gate line and through to escalators and lifts down to platform level. Stepping off your train at platform level, coming up the other direction. Up through the voids, out through the gate line and out through to the centre of Birmingham. Now a journey down Curzon Promenade. You see the tram there. Coming down, you can see the old Curzon Street Station in the middle foreground. Swinging round into the new public space in New Canal Street. Plenty of natural light through viaducts and then through to the eastern concourse. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We are running rather over time. I will just quickly put a couple of questions to you, although I have to say they're rather big questions. One says, have any of these transport schemes been reviewed in the light of changes to travel habits post-COVID, particularly the prevalence of home working and online meetings? And another one said, has the uncertainty surrounding HS2 affected the practice management of the scheme? Did it stop start or just tick over or what?
So the first question, I suppose that question is something that everyone is dealing with at the moment. Everyone's sort of trying to evaluate what's going to happen next. I don't really think that that's sort of unique to HS2. I think you can apply that to almost any area, any mode of transport, anything we do in our daily lives. I think what I will say is that HS2 is really about bringing people together. I think that we've perhaps there's a feeling of isolation during the COVID crisis. So I think anything that brings people together has got to be a good thing.
Okay. And what about the stop-start then on HS2? Did that affect you?
Didn't affect us at all. No, as I said, we had a very good design development program, plenty of good positive engagement with all the stakeholders.
Great. Okay, well, I'm going to call it to an end now. That was great, but it was long but great. We did have somebody say the engineering is architecture indeed. I like that principle, so impressive. And with that, I'm going to move on to our next speaker, who is Jonathan Lowy, who is Operational Marketing Manager of VMZinc. And he's going to talk to us about the historic link between zinc and transport infrastructure, which is going to be fascinating because I know nothing about it. So come and enlighten us, Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Ruth, and good morning, everybody. First thing, I'm going to try and share my screen. Hopefully, my screen's come up and everybody can see that.
Yeah, that's looking great.
Okay, excellent. So, zinc. Just a quick word. What zinc is? It's a metal, and it's been used to clad the outside of buildings for over 200 years. That's an example of Wrocław train station in Poland. I'm actually probably going to maybe I'll leave my video on, where zinc's been used in a fairly traditional way to clad the railway station. But before we go into a bit more detail, I'm just going to explain a little bit more about what we do, which does have a connection to railways and infrastructure. VMZinc's been making zinc since 1837, and these images on the screen are from some photos of a plant in the south of France called Vivier. I saw that somebody on the webinar is watching us from the south of France. I don't know whether that's near Vivier. And railways have brought ore and zinc cathodes to the factory and zinc sheets and coils away from the factory. And we do use, obviously, road transport, but rail is still used. And on the bottom right, there's a connection to an earlier speaker as well, because you can just about see about a third of an old engine turntable. Quite a lot of it was demolished a number of decades ago, but there's still some of it that's left. So there was actually a turntable for the engines on the site. So that's where we actually make the zinc, and on the top left you can see coils of zinc that can then be used for various uses, and we'll see a few. So that's in France, but in the middle of the 18th and 19th century, zinc was being used in the UK. On the left, there's some images from the Great Western Railway, Newport Station, and on the right, this is actually the front of King's Cross Station, where you can see Vieille Montagne zinc Italian pattern. VM stands for Vieille Montagne, which is Old Mountain in French. So zinc's got a long history, not only in France and continental Europe, but also in this country. But in France, where things were really taking off in the middle of the 19th century, you can see on the top right the Gare du Nord, which pretty much still looks like that, and then on the bottom right, the Gare de Lyon, which goes towards the southeast of France, all using new steel, which was being used in the 19th century with larger panes of glass and zinc to protect the buildings on the roofs, and indeed sometimes on the walls. And this is a little bit closer to home, Brighton Railway Station, which was built in 1839 and extended in 1882. And then the main station building was extensively renovated in 1999. And it's actually now a Grade 2 listed building. And you can see that's all zinc batten cap roofing covering the main roof of the station. Staying in Brighton, but a slightly smaller scale, this is well before Tesla. This is the Volks Electric Railway, which was the first electric railway back in 1883. And it's actually still, it's I suppose, a bit more of a tourist attraction now, probably not doing too well this summer, but it's actually on Brighton Beach using standing seam zinc with actually a sort of slightly engraved finish called Azingar, and you can see that the zinc is literally on the beach, and zinc does perform very, very well by the sea. It doesn't corrode like steel and some other metals. back to Network Rail. This is a project by Faraday Pollard Architects, and it's one of the first network rail stations that was built for Crossrail that was actually finished. Obviously, there's been quite a few delays on the Crossrail project, but this station, Abbey Wood in East London, was completed a couple of years ago, and you can see quite a complex design and the combination between pre-patinated quartz zinc standing seam roofing and some nice timber cladding. And on the right, you can see some of the intricate details showing how the water, there's box cutters and expansion joints, showing how you can use zinc in quite complicated geometries. And then another geometry, a sort of corkscrew, very different part of the world. This is the mass rapid transit system for Taipei Airport, where it's the same material as on Abbey Wood. It's pre-patinated quartz zinc, but been used as a rain screen and a sort of a corkscrew design. We would have to, I think, stop in Switzerland talking about railways, and this is actually it's a project which has a bit of a connection with I suppose Clapham Junction that Marko was talking about. It's an interface between a bus station and a railway station with a fairly elegant zinc canopy using pigmento zinc, which is zinc with a slight color to it, in this case red. With panels on the underside, the soffit in zinc, and then on the top side with the standing seam panels. And this is a tram depot in Spain, which was entirely clad in zinc. Slightly different system for turning the trains around. There's actually a circle as opposed to turntable there, but it's quite an interesting project, entirely clad in standing seam quartz zinc. This is slightly different types of transport, a car park and a cable car station, both in Chamonix in the French Alps. The photo on the left is down in the village, and on the top right is high up in the mountains. And again, zinc can be used in many climates, including cold climates where you get temperatures well below zero, -25, -30 at the top of the French Alps, again using the standing seam system. Back to the UK, this time in Scotland, and another interface building actually between the Edinburgh tram system and ScotRail. This is the Gogar interchange, where anthrazinc standing seam, this is the much darker zinc, has been used to clad the outside of the interchange building. So we've looked at railways, but there's also planes, and this is part of the Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris. This building was designed by Paul Ondra, not the one that collapsed, which was clad in stainless steel. I don't think that was stainless steel's fault, probably more the concrete. But this building was opened at the end of about 1998 and is still obviously active. This actually uses natural zinc, which is shiny, and there was an initial concern that there'd be problems with the zinc reflecting into the pilot's eyes, but zinc does form a patina fairly quickly. Even if you use natural zinc, it's not quite as uniform as the pre-patinated zinc, but here it's been used very successfully. Another airport, this time in Brest, a little bit like the Abbey Wood train station, elegant flowing lines, fairly low slope. Zinc isn't a flat roof material. It does require slopes with gutters, so you need a minimum slope of 3 degrees. And here you can see again some of the details showing how the zinc is connected, how the gutters are connected to evacuate water off the roof. And going from some low slope curves to slightly steeper slope angles, this is a project in Malaga in Spain, again an airport, very different type of design. And back to curves, this is Brno Airport in Czechia, where hexagonal zinc shingles in quartz zinc have been used to clad the outside of the building. So we've looked at some trains and we've looked at some planes and now some automobiles, or more precisely buses. Clapham bus station, which was designed by D5 architects quite a few years ago now. Again, combining zinc with timber, which is quite an effective combination. And the architects here wanted to create a very open environment where the access to the buses could be approached from all directions. And back to Angular, this is a toll booth in France, showing again timber and zinc combined. You might guess from that view where that is. That's overlooking Barcelona, the Montjuic area where there's a stadium and a cable car station. And here the outside of the cable car station has been clad in anthrazinc, the dark zinc rain screen panels. And back to buses, but we're keeping this sort of curved theme, very different locations. The top one is in the northeast of this country, Sunderland, and the bottom is in South Korea. They're both large bus stations, but both using the same pre-patinated quartz zinc with standing seam panels and a similar design, again, curved forms. Back to railways, this is a project in Spain, Antequera high-speed rail station, where the architects have wanted to sort of almost create these elegant curves that form part of the landscape, and I think that's been done quite effectively. As I said, you can create low sloping waves with zinc standing seam quite effectively. So just quickly, I've run through the options that can be used with zinc for transport, but there's many other options. If you do want some more information, if you do want samples, literature, drawings, we'd be more than happy to discuss that with you. But Ruth, I don't know whether you have any questions for me. I'll be happy to try and answer them.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. It's very difficult to travel at the moment, so thank you for taking us on a virtual journey. A couple of questions, and I'm going to ask them to you, both to you together. One of them says, Jack Parker, apologies if I missed the mention, but where is zinc sourced in Europe, and what is the environmental impact? Are the mines quite bad environmentally, or compared to other materials, pretty good? And the other question from John Malig says, in your opinion, how does zinc as a roofing cladding material compare with other metal roofing materials like copper, aluminium, lead, titanium? Now, I'm sure your answer to the second one will be, oh, well, it's much better because that's your job. But perhaps you could be a bit more dispassionate about that and give us something about the environmental impact of extraction.
Absolutely. I'll answer the first one, the second one first. Zinc and copper and aluminium and lead and titanium all have slightly different qualities. I wouldn't say zinc is better. It is different. It's quite similar to copper. It's a little bit different to lead. Lead's a bit softer. Aluminium's a bit stiffer. So there are quite a number of crossovers between them. And if they're all done well, they last a very long time, meaning over 100 years. One of the big differences is maybe aesthetics. So copper and zinc look a little bit different, and lead looks a bit different again. So it's possibly one of the big issues is aesthetics, which is dependent on the design. But they're all very durable, which leads me to the first question. Zinc, about 20% of the zinc that's actually used for roofing is from recycled sources, and all of zinc is recyclable, and about 99% actually is, because it has a value. So zinc's never thrown away. It's turned into either zinc for sheets or zinc for galvanizing or zinc for brass. As far as the mines, zinc is a relatively common ore. It is more common in South America, specifically Peru and Chile, and in Canada. There there was a mine in the North Pennines until 1949, and there still is a mine in Sweden, and until recently there was an active mine in Ireland. So mines are relatively common. The extraction of ore undoubtedly has an environmental cost, but on the plus side, there's more and more zinc that's been recycled, and it is very durable, so you don't have to replace it very often.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. And there was someone who made a comment who said it would be good to see more buildings in the UK using zinc as more used in Europe. Well, I don't have to put that to you as a question because I know you'd agree. Maybe in this presentation, you've helped to push it a little bit further. But thank you very much. And we're going to go on now to our last speaker, who is Tariq Khan, who's an associate with Stephen George and Partners. And he's going to be talking about the Daventry International Rail Freight Terminal. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who's tried to get my tongue round saying DERFT, as I've seen all those signs on the roads. So over to you, Tariq.
Hi, everyone. Bear with me. Can everyone see that?
Yeah, that's looking great.
Perfect. Hi, everyone. It's my pleasure, as you say, to talk about DERFT, in particular DERFT 3. DERFT is recognised as one of the most successful intermodal rail and road-linked logistics parks in the UK. And it's located in the heart of the Midlands on a site which you may all remember where there was many radio masts and some agricultural land, but now it's been much it's been developed. DERFT consists of effectively 3 parts: DERFT 1, 2 and 3, surprise, surprise. But DERFT 1, you can see here, is highlighted in blue, and DERFT 2 is in, which we've been involved with, is in purple on the left-hand side. That has been completed in 2015 and took approximately about 9 years. Just to give it a little bit of scale, the Sainsbury's building in DERFT 2 at the northern end, as you see it, I hope you can see me pointing maybe. The Sainsbury's building is about 1 million square foot of warehouse, and it's about over 20 meters high, just to give it a bit of scale to what you're looking at the moment. The reason why it's so successful is the fact that it's almost on the crosshairs of the A5, the M1, and the Western Coast Main Line. And inherently that obviously lends itself to the link of rail and logistics, which is obviously key to the park. Today I'm hopefully to focus on the talk on DERFT 3, which is which is currently being developed, and that's the yellow area to the north. And we've started that back in 2008. The overall master plan, you can see for DERFT 3, is kind of sandwiched between the M1 and the A5. This is on the left is the parameters plan, the master plan, which is considered the nationally significant infrastructure project, which is approved by the Secretary of State. And the plan is approved under Development Consent Order. This, alongside a design code, sets out the primary framework for which the master plan is to be developed into detail. And the parameters and alongside the design code sets out the key elements such as sort of limits of finished floor levels, building heights, densities, use, the phasing of the infrastructure, and the park as a whole. So within that, you can see that the plots, the zones, they're all quite linear. So the master plan itself is quite linear. The grey area that sort of sits between zone G and B is the main intermodal terminal. But again, the zones themselves also lend themselves to direct connection with the main rail line. At present, we have Zone E, which has been developed and completed. The blue area, the dashed blue area is the infrastructure that's been constructed, and the purple is the infrastructure that's due to be completed sometime next year, which includes part of the rail terminal itself. The rail terminal effectively, as I said, sits centrally to the master plan. It's quite simplistic in terms of the overall design. All the trains come in from the south and exit from the south, whereby the HGV and pedestrian access is also is accessible via the north. The HGV, obviously, there's a huge, it's all about flow and capacity and turnaround. So at the north, you have a large toll, which obviously manages the movements of HGV. And
go and push him and say, what are you doing?
Sorry, can everyone hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Sorry, I could hear someone else. Apologies. Got confused. So the terminal is phased as well. So the first phase is under development and like I say, due to be constructed next year. That's the western side. And then you have an eastern side, which is almost a mirror of the design for the first phase. In essence, you have the main rail tracks, 9 of them that sit in the center. Either side are the container storages for the shipping containers themselves. And around the perimeter of the terminal is the HGV access, giving 360 degrees movement, and the cranes linking in, enabling that connection for offloading and loading onto the rail. The overall, we anticipate that there will be there's a potential of 32 trains per day within the terminal itself, and the storage capacity of about just over 6,000 20-foot equivalent shipping containers, and within a year, it's anticipated that it potentially can handle up to 500,000 freight containers. Next slide. So within the park, there's other aspects other than the sort of the rail and the main logistic warehousing. It's sort of ancillary accommodations and facilities. There's a large, to the north of the development is Lilbourne Meadows, which is 70 hectares of enhanced landscaping and ecology. There's trim trails and green corridors linking through the master plan, linking the park and its surroundings. And these facilities enhance further with sort of recreational facilities, such as sort of sports pitches. There's EV charging points across the park. There's a large HGV lorry park, and training facilities and education building that's aimed for the residents and occupiers of the park. in essence, designing, it's about designing a park where businesses can thrive, where employees can fundamentally enjoy coming to work, being at work, and where communities and nature can flourish. I mean, it's anticipated that the Durft as a whole is going to be it's 2.7 million linked to its local communities and workforces in its surroundings. So this is the illustrative master plan in its entirety, showing both the rail and the potential warehouse link across the park. I mean, in essence, we estimate there will be about 7.8 million square foot of warehousing across just Durft 3 alone. And you can see from the master plan that the majority of the units are quite large. So the link between rail and warehouse kind of increases the occupiers generally, occupiers who need large space. I mean, the smallest warehouse on plan at the moment is around the 200,000 square foot mark, and the largest is up to 1 million, as you've seen before. This is so this is a sort of a little bit more of a 3D. I mean, overall the development is 9 million square foot of development, and it's anticipated that there's about 9,000 people expected to be employed across the development as well. In terms of the link between rail and logistics, I mean, the freight transported by rail it's estimated that it cuts the carbon emissions by 76% in comparison to road haulage. So it gives you a bit of an understanding of the sustainable side of things. In terms of the warehouse themselves, so we've developed with Prologis, who are the private developers of the park, their standard design parameters for their warehousing and their typical warehouse design. And the key drivers that sets out the parameters of kind of market demands and institutional standards, construction techniques, supply chain, and these are forever evolving. Here you can see kind of the various overarching elements that you kind of have with these larger units. You have the gatehouse, a hub, and the like. And there's specific branding and inherent architectural approach that we try and enhance and adhere to in order to have a harmonious sort of park, as it were. So it's quite critical to ensure that the architectural approach is a holistic one. So here you can see is a typical cross-dock. It's considered a cross-dock because it's a dual-sided warehouse, and in the top left is a single-sided warehouse. The units themselves obviously have separate access points for the HGV into the yards and separate ones for the pedestrian and workforce to ensure that the operation of the logistic warehouses can function without the hindrance of sort of the comings and goings of the workforce. The overall proportions of the warehouse tend to be between a ratio of 1 to 2 and a maximum of 1 to 3. The portal frames are based around optimization of sort of standard portal frame design, which accommodates sort of standard racking layouts, mezzanine adaptability, and your standard docks and level access door sizes. The yards themselves tend to be between 40 to 55 meters, enabling to accommodate sort of the main apron itself, HGV parking and general maneuverability. The administrative side of things tend to have the main office, an entrance in one of the corners that you can see is closest to the car park, and some outboard hub offices that are set within the apron that tend to be managing the operation of the apron and the yard, whereas the main office is tending mainly to do with administrative sides. I mean, these parameters that are set, they're all scalable. So depending, obviously, the size of the unit will dictate the number of docks, the number of level access doors, and that scalable goes all the way through to, say, the gatehouse. So whether the unit warrants the gatehouse, how many lanes, how many HGV queuing, it is all dictated by the overarching size, and that includes the height. So the heights tend to be between sort of anything for these sort of large units, 12.5 meters haunch to 21 meters high. So yeah, I mean, when I say scalable, it's almost you can type in the target warehouse requirement by a customer, and automatically we can give you what from the knowledge that is gained through the market demands, we can dictate the typical sort of dock requirements, level access doors, and the like. Key to it is also adaptability. So here it kind of shows how the main office can be adapted, enlarged, and grown, with the green area showing how a customer could come in and take what initially was the standard offering by the developer and enhance and grow it and adapt it to their own sort of operation. This is an example of Zone E. So this has already been built. This is a warehouse that's just under 500,000 square foot, occupied by the Arcadia Group. You can see that the offices are all sort of south-facing and almost the full length of the gable end. And the entrance has been adapted to be more central, but typically the rest is in the distance. You can see is there or thereabouts in terms of the dock positioning. The hub office and the yard is typically, we find, are standardized. This is the entrance, again slightly adapted to the tenant's needs. The entrance has been tried to be enhanced in order to embrace the warehouse as part of the entrance, so you get that sort of sense of scale beyond what typically was a smaller enclosed entrance. And again, the warehouse as well has also been adapted with mezzanine levels internally, all based around those standard parameters that I've illustrated before. This is DC 535 on Zone B. So this was a speculative build that's completed last year by the developer, 500,000 square foot, as I say, built speculatively, and has found an occupier, a tenant within, I think it was less than a month. So the rail, we believe, is a real attraction to customers like that, as well as enhancements internally. So there's a lot of emphasis now on sort of the well-being aspect, not only within the park design, but also internally. This is the welfare facilities within the DC3 double height space. So that green area, that green adaptable space that I was showing on the sketch earlier, in this instance has been used for double height welfare area. I mean, in essence, the designs we're finding, I mean, enhanced architectural design is becoming more and more of an attraction, not only by the developers, but also the tenants themselves. They're coming because they can see that the benefits to the workforce and fundamentally to their business, because it retains that workforce. And it's well embraced. I mean, because in essence, we're fundamentally trying to create better environments to working. And that is it. I've tried to be as quick as possible. Hopefully,
okay. Well, thank you very much indeed. We had someone on the chat asking about staff welfare, and you've covered that. So, oh, somebody's coming. I don't think this is even a question, but it's entertained me, so I hope it will entertain you. How do you get your head around dealing with such a massive and intricate set of requirements? It must be a bit like peering down from Mount Olympus. That was a bit how I felt, but I won't ask you to answer that. But there are a couple of more specific questions that if we can just answer quickly before we wind up. One says, is Durft an inland port, and will Brexit have an impact on the design? Another one asks, do staff have to arrive by car, or is there public transport access? And is warehouse architecture doing okay, even in this pandemic time and beyond? And some wants to know how the buildings are heated and serviced, and would solar panels be a good renewable energy solution?
So there's quite a few questions there, isn't there?
There are. That's good. Well, have a quick go, and you can answer them in detail later back to the original people if you want to.
Yeah, I can do. I mean, yes, I'll do that. I mean, in essence, how does Brexit and how is it dealing at the moment? It's a bit of a boom, to be quite honest, because obviously there's a lot of mail order going on, and there's a lot of stockpiling, and I mean, we're finding it extremely busy at the moment. So we're not affected by Brexit, and we, in terms of a downturn that let's say, and in terms of COVID, it's actually enhanced the industry, the sector, I would have thought. That's my own take on it.
And what about this idea? What about solar panels?
Solar panels are integrated, so there are.
Oh, okay.
They are part. There's solar wall as well that assists with the heating and cooling. So there are aspects and sustainable construction solutions that we're integrated within the park. Sometimes they're tenant driven. Majority of the time they are tenant driven, and they're not unheard of, because obviously there's quite a lot. Overall, the development has got consent to have as much PV on the roofs as possible without the need for planning application, for instance. So it gives you an idea of the approach.
That's brilliant. It's been a real eye-opener, as in fact I think of all the presentations this morning. I've really enjoyed it. I know people have been chatting in the chat, including trying to reconnect with old friends in some cases. That's all to the good. It's been lovely listening to it. I'm pleased to see there have been so many people from so many parts of the world. And I think all I really have to do on behalf of RIBAJ Journal, on behalf of PiP, on behalf of our supporters, is just to say thank you all very much for coming. And I hope very much to see you at the next one. So back to whatever other work you're doing today, and I'm going to say goodbye. Bye.